My name is Dr. Emma Sullivan, and this is the story of how a dying man taught me how to live again. It was a freezing December night when everything fell apart. The kind of night where the wind cuts through your bones and the darkness feels suffocating. I had just received the call every doctor dreads, the one that changes everything. "Dr. Sullivan, there's been a mistake." Those 5 words echoed in my mind as I stood frozen in the hospital corridor. Nurse Rebecca's face was pale, her hands trembling as she held the chart. "What kind of mistake?" I asked, though something in my gut already knew this was catastrophic. "The patient in ICU room 12, Mr. James Mitchell. We gave him O-positive blood." My heart stopped. "His chart says AB negative. I verified it myself before the transfusion." "I know," Rebecca whispered. "But the lab, they sent up the wrong unit. And we didn't catch it in time." I ran. I literally ran down that corridor, my white coat flying behind me, my mind racing faster than my feet. James Mitchell was a 47-year-old high school history teacher who had come in 6 hours ago after a severe car accident. A drunk driver had hit him head-on, causing massive internal trauma. He'd already survived 1 surgery, and we were keeping him stable with blood transfusions. Or so I thought. When I burst into his room, the monitors were screaming. His body was in full rejection mode, violent, reaction to the incompatible, blood now coursing through his veins. His face was flushed, sweat pouring down his temples, his breathing rapid and shallow. "James, can you hear me?" I called out, already moving, already giving orders to the nurses flooding in behind me. "Stop the transfusion immediately. Get me epinephrine, corticosteroids, move." His eyes found mine through the haze of pain and confusion. And in that moment I saw something that broke me. Not accusation, not anger, but a quiet, resigned sadness. Like he'd been expecting this. Like he'd already made peace with dying. "Not your fault," he managed to whisper before another wave of pain seized him. "But it was my fault. I was the attending physician. I should have double-checked, triple-checked. In my exhaustion after a 16-hour shift, grieving my father's recent death, barely sleeping, I had trusted the system, and the system had failed him. We had failed him. The next 4 hours were pure hell. James's body waged war against itself. His kidneys began shutting down. His blood pressure crashed twice. We pushed medications, fluids, everything in our arsenal to counteract the hemolytic reaction. I refused to leave his side, barking orders, monitoring every vital sign, willing him to survive through sheer determination. Dr. Harrison, the chief of surgery, pulled me aside around 2 a.m. "Emma, you need to step back. Let someone else take over." "No. You've been on for 18 hours. You're compromised." I said no. My voice cracked. "This happened on my watch. I'm seeing it through." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine, but I'm staying too." Somewhere around 4 a.m., James's vitals began to stabilize. The medications were working. His kidneys showed signs of function. His breathing eased. The crisis was passing. But he wasn't out of danger yet. His body had taken a massive hit, and he still needed surgery to repair internal damage from the original accident. We would have to wait at least 48 hours before he'd be strong enough to go under the knife again. As the immediate emergency subsided and the extra staff filtered out, I finally sank into the chair beside his bed. My hands were shaking. I'd been running on adrenaline, and now that it was fading, the full weight of what had happened crashed over me. I'd almost killed him. I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to hold back tears I couldn't afford to shed. "Not here, not now." "Hey, Doc!" His voice was weak, barely audible, but it startled me. I looked up to find James's eyes open, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You should rest," I said quickly, checking his monitors. "Your body's been through trauma." "So has yours," he interrupted softly. "I've been drifting in and out. But I heard you. The whole time. You never left." I didn't know what to say to that. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you stay?" The question hung in the air between us. Why had I stayed? Professional responsibility? Guilt? Or something deeper? Something I didn't want to examine too closely. "Because I had to," I finally said. "Because this was my responsibility. Because—" I hesitated. then decided he deserved the truth, because we gave you the wrong blood type. The lab sent up O positive instead of AB negative. It was a system error, but I should have caught it. I should have verified, and I didn't, so I stayed because you deserved to have someone fighting for you after we failed you so badly. I expected anger, shock, maybe even a demand to speak with a lawyer. James Mitchell was a teacher, an educated man who would understand the gravity of medical malpractice. Instead, he smiled. It was a weak, painful expression, but genuine. "Do you believe in second chances, Dr. Sullivan?" The question caught me completely off guard. What? Second chances? The idea that sometimes life gives us another opportunity when we've given up on the first one. He shifted slightly, wincing. "I'm a history teacher. I spend my days teaching kids about people who changed the world, who made their lives matter. And yet, I've spent the last 2 years convinced that my own life stopped mattering a long time ago." I stayed silent, sensing he needed to talk. "My daughter died 2 years ago," he continued, his voice distant. "She was 16, leukemia. I watched her fight for 2 years, watched her suffer through chemo, through pain no kid should ever experience. And in the end, I couldn't save her. Nothing I did mattered." His eyes met mine again, and I saw depths of pain I recognized all too well. "After Sophie died, my wife couldn't look at me anymore. Every time she saw my face, she saw our daughter. We divorced 6 months later, and I just stopped. I went through the motions, taught my classes, came home to an empty apartment, tried not to think about the fact that I had nothing left to live for. My breath caught in my throat. 3 days before the accident," he said quietly, "I wrote a suicide note. Sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of pills and a glass of whiskey. But I couldn't do it. Not because I wanted to live, but because I kept thinking about my students, about how they'd find out their teacher killed himself, and what that might do to them." He paused, taking a labored breath. Then the accident happened. Some drunk driver runs a red light, and suddenly the choice is taken away from me. And you want to know something strange? When that car hit me, when I realized I was dying, I wasn't relieved. I was angry, because I realized I didn't want to die. Not really, I just didn't know how to live without her anymore. Tears were streaming down my face now. And then tonight, when my body started failing, when I could feel myself slipping away, I heard you fighting for me. This doctor who didn't even know me, who had every reason to walk away and protect herself from the lawsuit I could file, staying and fighting like my life actually mattered, like I was worth saving. "You are worth saving," I whispered. "So are you," James said softly. "I heard what you said to the other doctor about being on for 18 hours. I see it in your eyes, that same emptiness I see in the mirror every morning. What are you running from, Dr. Sullivan?" And suddenly, without meaning to, I was talking, telling this stranger, this patient, I'd nearly killed about my father's death 3 months ago, about how he'd been my hero, my rock, and losing him had shattered something fundamental inside me, about throwing myself into work to avoid the crushing grief, about my own empty apartment, my own inability to remember what happiness felt like, about existing rather than living. "We're the same," James whispered when I finished. "Both of us just surviving. Both forgot what it means to actually be alive." "I'm so sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "For the mistake, for everything." "Don't be," he interrupted. "This mistake, it might be the thing that saves us both." Hospital protocol required James to remain under intensive observation for 48 hours before surgery. His body needed time to recover from the transfusion reaction, to rebuild strength. I should have been reassigned, should have filed an incident report immediately and stepped away from his care. But I couldn't. Something had shifted in that pre-dawn conversation, something I didn't fully understand yet. I requested to remain his attending physician. My supervisor, Dr. Harrison, gave me a long, hard look. "Emma, you know the protocol. After an error like this..." "I'm filing the full report," I said. "Every detail, every second. But please, let me see this through." He trusts me. And right now, that trust might be the only thing keeping him fighting. Dr. Harrison studied me for a long moment. 48 hours. Then we review everything. "And Emma? Get some sleep." You're no good to him dead on your feet. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw James's monitors screaming, saw his body convulsing, saw how close I'd come to killing him. So I stayed. Not every moment. I had other patients, other responsibilities. But every spare minute, I was in his room. At first I told myself it was medical necessity, monitoring for complications. But the truth was more complicated. James and I talked, really talked. Not doctor and patient, but two broken people who'd found each other in the darkest moment of their lives. He told me about Sophie, his brilliant, funny, brave daughter who loved astronomy and terrible puns, about how she'd faced her death with more courage than he'd ever managed in life, about the guilt of being the one who survived when she didn't. And I told him about my father, the country doctor who'd inspired me to go into medicine, who taught me that healing was about more than just fixing bodies, about how I'd been with him when he died, holding his hand, watching the man who'd seemed invincible just fade away, about the guilt of being a doctor who couldn't save the one person who mattered most. You know what Sophie told me the day before she died? James said during one of our late-night conversations. She said, "Dad, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid you'll forget how to live after I'm gone." And she was right. I did forget. My father told me something similar, I admitted. He said, "Emma, don't let grief make you forget that life is a gift." But I didn't listen. I just buried myself in work and pretended I was fine. "So we're both failing the people we loved most," James said with a sad smile. "Yeah, we are. Maybe it's time we stop," he suggested quietly. James's surgery was scheduled for early morning on the third day. I had barely slept, reviewing every detail of the procedure with Dr. Harrison, making absolutely certain nothing else could go wrong. As they prepared to take him to the OR, James grabbed my hand. His grip was weak but steady. "Emma," he said, using my first name for the first time. "Whatever happens in there, I want you to know something." "You're going to be fine," I said firmly. "Dr. Harrison is the best surgeon in the state." "Let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I want you to know that these 3 days, talking with you, connecting with someone who understands, it's the first time. I've felt alive since Sophie died. You gave me that. Your mistake, your guilt, your decision to stay, all of it brought me back to life. So thank you." I was crying now, not caring who saw. "You did the same for me. You reminded me why I became a doctor, why life matters even when it hurts." "Promise me something," he said. "Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll stop running. You'll face your grief, let yourself heal, and find a way to live again. Really live, not just exist." "Only if you promise the same," I managed to say through my tears. He smiled, that same gentle smile that had become so familiar over the past 3 days. "Deal." They wheeled him away, and I stood in the empty corridor, feeling more terrified than I'd ever felt in my life. This man I'd known for 3 days had become my anchor, my reason to keep fighting. And now he was in surgery, and all I could do was wait and pray. The surgery took 7 hours. 7 hours during which I paced, checked my phone obsessively, drank terrible coffee, and made bargains with God I wasn't sure I believed in. I wasn't assigned to the surgery. I was an ER physician. Not a trauma surgeon, but Dr. Harrison had promised to update me. When he finally emerged from the OR, still in his surgical scrubs, I practically ran to him. "He's stable," Dr. Harrison said, and my knees nearly buckled with relief. "The surgery went as well as could be expected. He's strong, Emma, stronger than we thought. He's going to make it." James spent another 2 weeks in the hospital recovering. I visited him every day, even on my days off. We talked about everything. His plans to return to teaching, my decision to finally see a therapist about my grief, his idea of starting a support group for parents who'd lost children. "Sophie would have liked you," he told me one afternoon. "She always said I needed friends who'd call me out on my nonsense. You definitely qualify." I laughed. "Your daughter sounds like she was amazing." "She was," James said. And for the first time, his smile when talking about her wasn't completely overshadowed by pain. She really was. On my third week of visiting, I finally filed my complete incident report. I documented everything: the wrong blood type, the transfusion reaction, my exhaustion, every detail. I was prepared for the consequences: suspension, mandatory retraining, possibly even the end of my medical career. Dr. Harrison called me into his office the next day. "I've reviewed your report," he said, his expression serious. "What happened was a serious breach of protocol. It endangered a patient's life and exposed the hospital to significant liability." "I know, sir. I take full responsibility. However," he continued, "I've also spoken with Mr. Mitchell. He's refused to pursue any legal action. In fact, he's written a letter to the hospital board about your care." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. I read James's words through tears. "Dr. Emma Sullivan made a mistake that could have killed me, but she also saved my life, not just physically, but in every way that matters. She taught me what it means to fight for someone, to care when it would be easier to walk away. She gave me a reason to want to live again. If the hospital punishes her for her honesty, her dedication and her humanity, then they've fundamentally misunderstood what healing actually means. You'll undergo mandatory retraining on transfusion protocols," Dr. Harrison said. 6 months probation. Mandatory counseling, which frankly, you should have been doing already. But Emma, you're a good doctor. What happened was a system failure as much as an individual one. We're implementing new protocols to make sure it never happens again. Learn from this. Don't let it destroy you. I took 2 weeks off after that meeting. I started therapy, real therapy, not just going through the motions. I joined a grief support group. I started running again, something I'd loved before my father died. Slowly, painfully, I started to heal. James and I stayed in touch, not as doctor and patient anymore, but as friends, real friends. He returned to teaching, threw himself into his work with renewed passion. He started a foundation in Sophie's name to support families dealing with childhood cancer. 6 months after that terrible, wonderful night, James invited me to the foundation's first fundraiser, a dinner and auction to raise money for cancer research. I almost didn't go. It felt strange, blurring the lines between my professional life and personal life. But something told me I needed to be there. The event was held in a beautiful hotel ballroom, filled with people whose lives had been touched by childhood cancer. Survivors, families, doctors, researchers. James stood at the podium, looking healthier and more alive than I'd ever seen him. 6 months ago, he began, I was ready to give up on life. I'd lost my daughter, my marriage, my sense of purpose. I was just going through the motions, waiting for my life to end. He paused, his eyes finding mine in the crowd. Then I had an accident, and in that accident a mistake was made. A mistake that should have killed me, but instead it saved me. Because in the darkest moment of my life, a doctor I'd never met before fought for me like I mattered. She stayed when she could have walked away. She cared when it would have been easier not to. She showed me that even in our broken state, we can still matter to someone. Tears were streaming down my face. This foundation exists because of Dr. Emma Sullivan, James continued. Because she reminded me that life is worth fighting for, even when we've forgotten why. Because she showed me that our worst mistakes can become our greatest opportunities for grace. After his speech, James found me in the crowd. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for inviting me," I replied, "and for that speech." "You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did," he interrupted. "Because it's true. All of it." We stood there for a moment. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and somehow made it back to the light. "I have something for you," James said, pulling a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. "It's from Sophie." Well, sort of. Inside was a beautiful leather journal, and on the first page, written in a teenage girl's handwriting, "Dad, when I'm gone, I want you to write down all the good things that happen. Even the small ones, especially the small ones. Promise me you'll remember that life is full of beautiful moments, even in the sad times. I love you, Sophie." She gave me this journal the week before she died, James explained, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't bring myself to write in it. Every time I tried, All I could think about was what I'd lost. But after meeting you, after everything that happened, I finally started, and I want you to have one too. Because you taught me something. Emma, you taught me that sometimes. The worst moments of our lives are the doorways to the best ones. I opened the journal he'd given me, a twin to Sophie's, and on the first page, James had written, "For Emma, who fought for a stranger and taught him how to live again. May you find the same grace you showed me, James." A year after that December night, I stood in James's classroom at Washington High School. He'd invited me to speak to his history students about medical ethics, about the real human cost of mistakes, about responsibility and redemption. The students listened, wide-eyed, as I told them the truth about the wrong blood type, about how close I'd come to ending a life, about how that mistake had somehow saved 2 people instead of destroying them. "So Mr. Mitchell could have sued you?" one student asked. "Absolutely," I said. "He would have had every right to. Why didn't he?" another student wondered. James, sitting at the back of the classroom, smiled. "Because Dr. Sullivan taught me something important. She taught me that people are more than their worst moments. That grace, real grace, means seeing someone's humanity even when they've failed. And that sometimes the most broken things, when put back together, become the most beautiful." After class, as students filed out, one girl hung back. She was about 16, thin and pale, wearing a knit cap over what was clearly a bald head. "Mr. Mitchell told us about your daughter," she said quietly. "About Sophie. I have leukemia too. I just wanted to say it helps knowing that he understands, that he's still here, still fighting, even after losing her. It makes me think that even if I don't make it, the people I love will find a way to be okay." James's eyes filled with tears. He knelt down to her level. "You listen to me, Ashley," he said firmly. "You are going to fight this thing with everything you have. And whether you beat it or not, your life matters. Every single day of it. You matter to your family, your friends, to me. Don't you ever forget that." She hugged him, this brave young girl facing her own mortality. And I saw it. The reason James had survived. The reason he'd found his way back to living. Not just for himself, but for all the Sophies and Ashleys of the world. The kids who needed someone who understood. As we walked to our cars that evening, James turned to me. "I've been thinking," he said. "The foundation is doing well. We're funding research, supporting families. But I want to do more. I want to create a mentorship program, matching kids fighting cancer with people who've lost someone to the disease. People who can understand what they're going through." "That's a beautiful idea," I said. "I want you to be on the board," he continued. "You're a doctor, yes, but more than that. You understand what it means to transform pain into purpose. We need that perspective." I thought about it for a moment, about how far we'd both come from that terrible December night, about the journal I now filled regularly with moments of grace and beauty, about the therapy sessions, where I was finally learning to grieve my father without drowning in it, about the life I was slowly, carefully rebuilding. "I'd be honored," I said. 2 years after the mistake that changed everything, I stood as the maid of honor at James's wedding. Yes, you read that right. James had found love again, with Laura, a grief counselor he'd met through the foundation, a woman who understood loss, who'd lost her own son to cancer years before, who knew that moving forward didn't mean forgetting. As I watched them exchange vows, promising to cherish each other through whatever life brought, I felt my phone buzz. A text from my own boyfriend, Marcus, a therapist I'd met in my grief support group. "How's the wedding? Missing you." I smiled, typing back, "Beautiful. See you tonight." Who would have thought? 2 years ago, I was a hollow shell of a person, going through the motions of living. And now here I was, surrounded by people I loved, doing work that mattered, allowing myself to be happy without guilt. At the reception, James pulled me aside. "I have something to tell you," he said, his eyes bright with emotion. "Laura's pregnant. We just found out yesterday." I hugged him tightly, tears of joy streaming down my face. "James, that's incredible. I never thought I'd get this chance again," he said. "To be a father, to have a family. After Sophie, I thought that part of my life was over. But here I am, getting a second chance at everything. You deserve it, I told him. You deserve all the happiness in the world. So do you, Emma, he said seriously. You saved my life that night, not just physically, but in every way that matters. You gave me back my future. I want you to know that I see you doing the same thing for yourself, building a life, letting yourself love again. Your father would be proud. We stood there, two people who'd found each other in the darkest moment and somehow made it to the light together. Can I tell you something? I said. That night when I almost lost you, it was the worst moment of my professional life, but it was also the moment I started living again. You showed me that it's okay to be broken, that mistakes don't have to define us, that there's always a chance for redemption if we're brave enough to take it. We saved each other, James said simply. That's the truth of it. Two broken people who found each other exactly when we needed to. 3 years after that December night, I received an invitation to speak at a medical conference about medical errors and patient-doctor relationships. They wanted me to tell my story, the whole story, mistakes and all. I almost declined. Even after all this time, talking about that night still hurt. But then I thought about James, about Ashley, who'd beaten her leukemia and was now in college, about all the people whose lives had been touched by our story. So I stood on that stage and told the truth. I told them about the exhaustion, the grief, the mistake. I told them about James's transfusion reaction, about fighting for his life, about the conversations in the dark that saved us both. I told them about how the worst moment of my career became the beginning of my real life. Medicine teaches us to fear mistakes, I said to the room full of doctors and nurses. And we should. Mistakes cost lives. But we also need to remember that we're human, that sometimes our brokenness connects us to our patients in ways our competence never could, that grace and redemption are possible even in our darkest moments. After the presentation, a young resident approached me, tears in her eyes. I made a mistake last month, she whispered. A medication error. The patient survived, but I've been eaten alive with guilt. I was thinking about leaving medicine, but hearing your story, maybe I don't have to throw everything away. Maybe I can learn and grow and still be a good doctor. I took her hands in mine. You can, but you have to be honest with yourself, with your supervisors, with your patients, and you have to forgive yourself. That's the hardest part. That night, I called James. He and Laura now had a beautiful baby girl. They'd named her Sophie Grace, honoring the daughter he'd lost and the grace that had brought them all together. How'd the speech go? He asked. Good, I think. Hard, but good. A young doctor came up to me after she'd made a mistake and was thinking about quitting. I think I helped her see another path. Of course you did, James said warmly. That's who you are, Emma. You take broken things and help them heal, including yourself. We did that for each other, I corrected. Yeah, he agreed softly. We did. After we hung up, I pulled out my journal, the one James had given me, now filled with 3 years of moments worth remembering. I turned to a fresh page and wrote, Today I told our story to a room full of strangers. I told them about the worst mistake of my life and how it became my salvation. And I realized something. I'm not ashamed anymore. Not of the mistake, not of my brokenness, not of any of it. Because all of it, the pain, the errors, the darkness, led me here. To a life full of purpose, love and meaning. To friendship with an extraordinary man who taught me that second chances are real. To the understanding that we save each other, often in the most unexpected ways. James asked me once if I believed in second chances. Now I know the answer. I don't just believe in them. I'm living proof of them. This is why I keep living, not just existing, but truly living. Because every day is a gift. Every connection matters. Every mistake can be a doorway to grace if we're brave enough to walk through it. Sophie was right. Life is full of beautiful moments, even in the sad times, especially in the sad times. You just have to be willing to see them. I closed the journal and looked out at the city lights, thinking about a December night 3 years ago, when everything fell apart and came together all at once. Thinking about a man who became my friend, my anchor, my reminder that life is always worth fighting for. The wrong blood type had almost killed James Mitchell, but in the end it saved us both. And that, I've learned, is the beautiful, messy, miraculous truth about being human. Our worst moments can become our greatest blessings. Our deepest pain can lead to our most profound healing. And sometimes the people we save are the ones who save us right back. This is why I keep living. This is why we all keep living. Because grace is real, second chances exist. And love, in all its forms, has the power to resurrect even the most broken hearts. The end. Author's note: if you or someone you love is struggling with depression, grief, or suicidal thoughts, please reach out. Call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988. Your life matters. Your story isn't over. And there are people ready to sit with you through the darkness, just like Emma and James sat with each other